Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Welcome to another MSI Insider live stream. I'm Mike and I'm here together with the one and only.
I'm Ruud.
Welcome, welcome. You know, if Ruud is here, it's going to be a technical topic because today we're going to talk about our new BIOS version.
New BIOS layout, yes. Indeed.
And you've been testing with this a lot already. That's also why you're here, to tell us all about it, how it works, how it differs from the existing, I should say, old BIOS version nowadays.
Old one,
previous BIOS version.
They still exist.
Still exist. Before we go into it, this live stream will be a little bit different than most live streams. We will still answer questions from the chat, but please be informed that we will only answer questions that are specifically about the BIOS. We do still have a giveaway. However, the winners will be drawn at the very end of the stream. We will then still call out the names, so you will know if you won or not. But you won't have any drawings in between. So make sure to participate. We're giving away several Steam wallet codes. Go to msi.com/2/insider or follow the direct link to Gleam that our bot puts in the chat on YouTube and Twitch once every 5 minutes. Ruud, before we go into all the new stuff, let's do a little bit of history class. You're also a little bit of, well...
Yeah, I'm old,
you're
yes.
the
You can say
and the
that.
history for MSI. So, how many years have you been in MSI now?
25, yeah.
25, okay.
Yeah.
So the stuff that we will talk about now, you've all seen come and go.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. When I started here, then everything was still in plain text. So yeah, that's where it started.
When I show this, what do you then say?
Then I say, these were the great days. Old guys always remember the past as something beautiful.
So this is basically before we introduced our first Click BIOS version.
Yeah.
So where you can also use the mouse to navigate.
And some graphical stuff, yeah.
And some graphical stuff indeed. We had like a plain text basic BIOS basically.
Yep.
And this was all the way up until the 900 series Intel approximately. 975X, 965P, that era.
I think that's the latest one, I would say, 900 series, yeah.
So here, everything controlled with a keyboard.
I think the first P series also had,
But with the P series later on, P35.
Yeah,
that was
well, the P35 was actually, it was like a test or a pilot run, and only on one board. So the rest of them still had a text one.
Still the text one, yeah.
But that one was funny because you got also a CD. With games on it.
So you can play games in your BIOS.
Indeed, yeah. So it was more like a showcase of what UEFI was about compared to the old textile BIOS. Yeah. So it was like a playground, right?
Pilot with Pilot with P35 and then P45. Basically everything became this kind of BIOS, or still partly?
Yeah, I think maybe first only the high end. I think maybe P55 was then. I'm not sure. Maybe we also continued some text as well.
So
I can imagine that. The
like
lower end probably had the text version, or probably also to save space in the BIOS ROM. So smaller ROMs are cheaper than bigger ROMs. That's how it works, right? Yeah. So I'm not 100% sure which models had the graphical interface and which one had the text interface at that time.
Because these are our first versions of Click BIOS, but they look very different to what we're used to.
Yeah, and in that time, the interface was kind of very playful and not very, less functional. So not designed for function, but more for, graphical stuff.
And still, especially when you see the one on the left, which is a bit of a pilot version, that one still looks kind of like the text-based version.
Yeah, exactly. So probably more keyboard based than mouse behavior, but the right side is the 400 series that is already, I don't know, it's different design than I would like.
Moving over to a better design with newer generations, and this already starts to look a lot more than what most people will be used to.
I think this design has served us very well. I mean, for a long time, so over 10 years. I think it was a good design, and also had some good features compared to our rivals, I would say. But also that was work in progress, so you have more slides about that.
So this is also where the graphical interface was a lot more present than in the earlier versions.
And what this one had was a better overview, so you still could see where all the menus were, and also, for example, which BIOS version you have, so that the top ribbon, that was very useful. Maybe the design was like that by accident, but it served us very well.
And you actually told me something very interesting about this design, because it was not completely designed by MSI, right?
It was not designed by MSI at all.
Not at all?
No, it was just a user who designed it, because we had like
this
a
was
BIOS.
A contest, right?
This is a contest, yeah, design contest. Make the best possible look for a new BIOS. And this is what came out, so the blue one, that is, yeah. That's what we call the Click BIOS 2 at that time.
Yeah. And on the right, you also see the version with the black and red that we then had for our gaming model.
I think at that time we had the blue, and then we moved over to blue, yellow, and red. So the yellow was the overclocking one, the red was the gaming one, and the blue was for everything else. Yeah.
So here we see Click BIOS 2, for example, but this is Click BIOS 4 already, and here you see the yellow one.
The yellow,
back in the day, our X-Power motherboard.
Yeah, X-Power, M-Power, yeah.
So really meant for overclocking.
Yeah.
And also a couple of new features. So virtual buttons, like in the top left, you see OC Genie.
OC Genie, yeah.
But these kind of buttons we've seen all the way up until basically Click BIOS 5 with enabling.
We still see it in today's BIOS, but then in different form.
Different form, yeah. And also the side frame was a new thing, so basically a collapsible part with a bit of an explanation of what a BIOS feature does. Yeah. Sometimes the explanations were very cryptic, but it's a lot of BIOS features or options are just like magic, or unexplainable, or probably nobody knows really what it does. And some, of course,
just copy it from Intel or AMD and just put it in there, and if you know what to do with it, fine. If you don't, just leave it alone. That's
so
basically
in today's live stream, we will talk about a lot of features, but you will try to pick out the ones that are probably most useful for everyone.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff in there that nobody touches, or hardly anybody touches.
Or maybe people shouldn't even touch, because it makes their system unstable.
I also have a lot of options that I don't know what it does, so usually I just leave them alone. Usually auto is a good setting. For
in
that
most
one.
situations.
In most situations, yes, yeah. But there are some stuff you can tweak and set to your preference. So
Then, more new features within the BIOS. For example, hardware monitor, board explorer. Can you explain a little bit about that?
The hardware monitoring part, and especially the fan profile. I also had a little bit of a hand in that to push the BIOS team to make this. Actually, it was based on, at the time, Afterburner. It also had like the custom fan profile option. And I thought it was a cool idea to also put this in for the CPU and the system fans for the motherboard. And it took a while, because this is like a what they call a UEFI module. So it runs actually inside the EFI environment. And that's also why there's like an X, so to close the window.
So basically it almost starts to look like Windows, like the operating system.
Yeah, more or less, So modules, and you also have drivers in EFI and stuff like that. So it's more of a mini OS, you could say. And that took some time to develop, but they made it happen, and it worked very well. I think it's what made EFI more useful. So the graphical interface, if you have to set up the fan profile without seeing the chart, it's just numbers, right?
Happens,
then you still, in your head, you still need to make the drawing. Then I think this is what I want, right? And later on, they also evolved that part. So.
That's what we see here, for example.
I also like the other one, the previous one with the motherboard, the layout and what is connected and what speed, and you could see if a USB 2 or USB 3, or if it's a LAN, and what speed was connected. But at that time, it took a lot of room inside the ROM, so they removed it in the later ones.
Because at a certain point, especially when you start to support more and more CPU generations, you need
I remember
like
the B450 for AMD. Then there was a lot of fight about what can we support in how many generations of CPUs because
AM4
was so long,
yeah.
And all the CPU support need to put in there, so we had to lose features we loved before. And one of the things that was removed because probably there's a lot of space involved in the motherboard picture and the interactivity with the connectors and stuff. So they made way for other stuff like CPU support,
which is also very important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So here we see basically a very basic version of hardware monitor.
Yeah.
But here it already looks a lot more as we know it today, basically.
Yeah. More fan profile points, so you have more to choose from, and that keeps evolving. So now you can add more points yourself. So if it starts with 3, you can add 4, 5, 6. But that's Click BIOS 10 or Click BIOS X. I don't know what the real name is, but that's the one we're going to show today.
And also, of course, because you can use your mouse, it's very easy with drag and drop with the different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So this is still Click BIOS 4, but then we moved over to Click BIOS 5, and this one we had for a very long time, right?
We have a very long time, yes. And we also have a video about these settings for Click BIOS 5.
That was actually made by Martijn, who now works for AMD. So we had him in the live stream a couple of times as a guest for AMD.
Yeah.
He used to work for MSI.
He did a very good video on that one, and this one is still supported on all AM4 motherboards and also part of the AM5 motherboard. So and the older Intels,
The new BIOS version is available on both AMD and Intel 800 series.
Yeah.
All of them. So all the way from entry level to higher end.
Yeah. Everything older.
Yeah, everything older is
Click BIOS 5
Click
or
BIOS
even
5.
earlier.
Yeah. So there are also still motherboards in the market, for example AMD 600 series, that are still running Click BIOS 5. So in case you want to know more specific things about Click BIOS 5, then make sure to check that video as well. It is a couple of years older, well, a couple of years. I think it's from 2017, 2018. But still a lot of useful information in there. I see a question by Alan in the chat. Is Click BIOS X or 10 going to be used on the 600 series AMD boards? No. They will still continue to run Click BIOS 5. Of course, there will still be BIOS updates for those boards as well. But based on Click BIOS 5, whereas the 800 series for both Intel and AMD are running the new Click BIOS X or Click BIOS 10, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, don't expect any feature updates on Click BIOS 5 anymore, so only bug fixes and security updates and stuff like that.
Maybe sometimes, for example, when AMD has a certain feature in a new Giza version,
for
those
Giza,
kind of things, those kind of things you can still expect. But at least like that, the MSI focus on fine-tuning the BIOS will now, of course, shift to the new Click BIOS X. Click BIOS 5, so one thing we introduced there was switching between easy mode and advanced mode.
Yeah.
And I know this is a very much appreciated feature by a lot of users because I think
a lot of people are scared of the BIOS and
but it can
the
be
easy
very
mode.
Overwhelming when you first open it, and there is so many options in the earlier versions.
Especially the text one because
because everything is in there. And here still, all those options are still there, but they're basically hidden behind the advanced mode.
Exactly.
And if you're not very familiar with BIOSes, if you only want to have the basics right, then there is an easy mode. And as the name already implies, it's very easy to use. But of course, will give you more limited options than what you would find in advanced mode.
Yeah, I think the most used features are still there. I mean, most people just go into the BIOS, set the memory profile, and
so usually XMP or Expo,
and then save and exit really. And some still want to tune like the fan profile, and that's about it. I would say. And you can do everything like that from the easy BIOS. So you don't really have to go into the advanced BIOS if you don't need to.
And this is also something we still have in our new BIOS version. And today we will also show you both the modes. So first we will go through the easy mode, and then we will go through what you can do with advanced mode. So in case you want to do more advanced stuff that you cannot find in easy mode anymore, then you have to go to the advanced mode. But usually that it is intended for more advanced users. If you're like a first-time PC builder, you're not very familiar with the BIOS, then of course we recommend stick to the easy BIOS. That was it for history class.
Yeah.
Let's move over to showing let's start with the easy easy mode on our new BIOS version. So today we have two systems. They're in front of me.
Yeah.
One is Intel based on an MAG Z890 Tomahawk Wi-Fi motherboard. The other one is an AMD based system based on an MPG X870E Carbon Wi-Fi motherboard.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which CPUs are running on there.
9950X for the AMD,
for AMD,
and 285K for the Intel.
For the Intel. So both are also overclockable.
Yeah.
And later in the live stream, we will also talk about overclocking a little bit. We won't do a lot of live
No, we don't do the
benchmarks or
overclocking.
testing, but we will explain a little bit how it works, what does what, and we will do that for both Intel and AMD platforms because there are some differences between those two.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's start with the easy mode. Which system do you want to start on? Intel or
Let's
AMD?
try the Intel.
Intel?
Yeah. Then I'll just go to the BIOS first.
Yeah.
I could have done that before, but I always use a batch file to go to the BIOS. Then I don't have to press the delete button for 1500 times, so that's easier.
Can you maybe also pull the AMD system into the BIOS? Then we can already show one interesting thing that changed with the new kit.
Yeah. Let's do that.
So on our Intel system,
I see
we
what
can
you
already
mean.
see some MAG branding,
Yeah.
and also the BIOS itself is in an MAG look and feel.
Yeah. It's
Um,
the green from the MAG.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we move over to AMD, once it's booted, then you will see that it will look different.
Should go up in a few seconds. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
And there we go. So this is not an Intel AMD thing. This is based on the generation. So if you get an MAG board or an MPG board, whether it's Intel or AMD, it will look different. MEG will also look different. Pro series will look different, and our other gaming series will look different as well. So this is MAG series. This is MPG series. So you will see from like the green, yellowish, and here you see the pinkish for the MPG.
Yeah.
Question in chat: where can I get the batch file? So I think
I will
talking
show
about
you.
the batch file
Yeah.
that you
I will
made.
show you, and I'll also put it on the MSI forum. I'll put it in link. We can put it in the description of the YouTube, right?
Yeah, we can put it in. Yeah. So basically, you put that on your desktop, for example, and it immediately.
Yeah,
gets
that's
you
what I do.
to
Yeah,
BIOS.
yeah.
Okay. Let's head back to the Intel system, and then you can show us what can we find in the easy mode of the Intel.
Well, the first part I want to show you is, of course, the help. And the help is not, it's just how you control the buttons or what kind of function keys are there. Like the general help is what I pressed, and the favorites assistant, and the favorites, and the core center, the hardware monitoring, and optimize defaults. I think most people will just press F6, optimize defaults, enable XMP or Expo for the memory profile, and then save and exit. Actually, it says save and reset, but I think that's a bit of a weird name, because if you save it, why would you reset the stuff you just saved?
Then you basically
Well,
throw it out of the window again.
Exactly. So, bit weird, but yeah, that's just my autistic brain, I guess.
So basically, it's like a clear CMOS.
Yeah, the part you will probably also use a lot is the F7. So you switching between advanced and easy mode. Advanced is where all the stuff is, and easy mode is where you can have a nice overview of the basics, and that's it. Also, if you're into overclocking, then loading and saving profiles with F8 and F9 would be very interesting. And for me as a troubleshooter, I use a lot of F12, the snapshot. This just, if you have a USB key and you press F12, it will ask you where do you want to save it, and you need to save it on a FAT32 USB stick or other kind of drive. It doesn't. It cannot write to any NTFS disk.
Xbox may work as well, but
I haven't tried it,
yeah.
so.
But NTFS for sure doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It doesn't have the rights to write to NTFS, and that's what it. Yeah, that's the limitation of this.
Yeah.
And then it says, okay, I've stored it into the this file, and yeah, I use that a lot if I want to show people where to find certain BIOS options or what they need to set, and then I just circle it with a red circle and then say, okay, this is the one you need. That's really handy. Also, if you want to ask for help, for example, on forums or, for example, through the account.msi.com, then
you can just post.
Yeah, just a BIOS screenshot will help you, or snapshot, and that's it.
So these are my settings. I'm running into this problem, and it's easy for
exactly.
people to comment.
If I do this, then that will happen, and pictures says a lot more than just English words for a lot of people. So yeah, that will help. I think that's very basic, and we can also see, well, the first part here, the CPU, the game boost. I think that's very similar as the OC Genie button we saw in the older versions. You can turn that on and off. Not sure what it does on Arrow Lake though. It will try to auto overclock it a little bit, but Arrow Lake is a bit hard to overclock. So there's not a lot of extra room there. Also slightly harder to undervolt and get it more efficient. So a lot of the overclocking features I will tell about Intel will be more applicable to Raptor Lake and stuff.
Yeah, but those of course run on Click BIOS X.
Yeah, but the options are basically the same. So I'm gonna just repeat those. Also, we can overclock the NPU. Not really sure if that's really useful at the moment, but maybe in the future. The memory, here you can select the XMP profiles, and this set, it has 3 profiles, and if you click the little exclamation point, or you don't just hover over it, then it will just say what those profiles are. That's very useful, and
this
you can
is something
see
that will differ based on the exact memory module.
Yeah. If you put different modules in, you can have like only one XMP or Expo profile, and it will just show you what your options are. And also
some kits even have both available, XMP and Expo profile.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Standard means it's running at what they call SPD speeds, or JEDEC speeds, is also sometimes called. In this case, when we booted, it was running at 4800 DDR5. That's the standard speed. If I click XMP1, it should be running at 7200. Of course, then there's also information about the motherboard. It's good to know which motherboard you're running on. Also for the snapshot, BIOS version, and also temperatures is interesting. The CPU, the memory, the storage. All those things are very useful information if you send a screenshot of the BIOS to if you're asking for help. I think this panel is also shown in the advanced mode in a slightly different layout, but the most important stuff is there. From here you can also go to the top menu. We have M-Flash, we will show you later. And also hardware monitoring. We will go through the menu first, and then I will just click them one by one. MSI performance presets, the profiles, the favorites, and the BIOS log. So when you make changes to the BIOS settings, then it will log or list them, so you can see, okay, this is the part I've changed so far, and if you want to do more, you can do whatever you want. The help we already covered. You can also choose different languages if you like. There's a search button, so if you want to search for XMP, it will just find it there.
So you don't have to go through all the different menus.
Yeah,
to find
if you look for something specific, then you can just search for it, and you don't have to go all the menus. Yeah.
XMP is of course also on the main screen, so that one is easy, but some may be a little bit harder to find.
Exactly, yeah. So you can also make a screenshot by pressing the button. You can also press F12 on your keyboard, and exit is just exit. So let's go to M-Flash. We will do later. Hardware monitoring, that's the new one. So now we have more points, and you can even add more. I think you can add another level, right? So you can enter a 90 degrees and then also do 100. I don't know. there's an error. Oh, it cannot be the same level. Okay, why not? I think like that is okay. So it's not really an error, or maybe it was a user error. So, but you can add more points. So what I mean to say is we started with 2 points, and then we added more, and now you can add your own. So basically more flexible. Other stuff you can choose
your own fan behavior, basically.
Exactly, yeah, and you can also base it on different temperatures. So there's a CPU socket sensor there as well, but also the system, which is probably somewhere on the motherboard, not sure exactly where. The MOS, that's the power circuit of the
VRM,
CPU. So that's the VRM on the motherboard, and the PCH is basically the chipset. There's also a temperature sensor in that one. So for the CPU fan, most of the time, well, it's blocked by our logo here, but CPU fans usually are controlled by CPU temperature, which is very normal, but a sys fan could monitor something else and also respond to different temperatures, if you like.
Yeah, and for example, when you have certain mini ITX boards, you have like those smaller fans on the motherboard as well. You can also set those, for example, to chipset temperature, those kind of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Before we continue, I see some questions in chat. Edwin K is asking, I have a crashed hard disk in my system and the startup will cost 2 minutes. How can I disable a SATA connection in the BIOS?
Not sure if I understand it.
Like basically disable the SATA port, Edwin? Let us know.
Why not pull the cable?
Yeah, crashed hard disk is, I think maybe because it's doing some error.
If the hard disk is broken, you just remove it, right?
Yeah, I'm also not sure what that one means, but maybe we get some clarification. Pandorian Gray says, would be nice to be able to save BIOS config to USB. That can be used after a BIOS update that wipes out your save profiles.
That's possible. The profiles, that's almost the next one, so we can click that one. You can load and save, and that will be saved to the BIOS flash ROM, but you can also save it to a USB stick.
But again, like with the snapshots, make sure it is formatted in FAT32, because if it's NTFS, then also this won't work.
Yeah, and then you can say I wanted to save to a different folder. That's even possible, and then just press enter to save, I guess. Oh yeah, and you need to name it. Boot standard or something, whatever. But please know that if you update the BIOS, sometimes the profiles are not compatible with old BIOS, new BIOS, and you need to make the new one. Especially if, for example, for AMD, if the AGISA is different, then a lot of stuff is changed, and then you cannot really load the old profiles anymore.
Especially also if you've done overclocks, something that is stable on a certain BIOS version,
also,
after an update can become unstable. So yeah, it is. At least if you only have some basic settings that you want to take with you.
Yeah, if it's in the same BIOS version, you can save whatever you want, and between versions, sometimes it works, but not all the time. So yeah, keep that in mind.
Skeets has a question in chat as well. Will this BIOS be available on laptops?
I'm not sure. We've seen, we've had a text-based BIOS on laptops for a long time, much longer than our motherboards. And at that time, we also asked notebook team, can we also make that graphical? And basically what they did at that time was they used the Click BIOS 4 or 5 or whatever, but then the light version, so the less fancy one, I would say. Yeah. So that's the one that's currently in our laptops. Yeah, it works, but it's not looking that modern anymore. I would say.
But also it doesn't give you as many options as what you would find with a separately bought motherboard.
No, yeah, the options on laptops is limited, especially in the default mode, but there's also a hidden mode, and I think almost anybody can find the shortcut for that one.
Yeah, but again, only do that if you're an advanced user and you know what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly, because there's a lot of options in notebook BIOSes that make the notebook no longer boot up anymore, and for a lot of people that's going to be a big problem. Yeah, I think a lot of people are who are doing building their own computers with desktops. They are familiar with setting up Windows and stuff, but your laptop usually is coming with a pre-installed Windows with all the drivers and the applications.
Basically ready to go.
Yeah, and you can also reinstall Windows, no problem, but then you lost all your data. So be careful when you're messing with notebook BIOS settings, I would say. That was the profiles part, so you can load and save to ROM, but also save to USB stick, and then even give to a friend of yours and has the same motherboard, same BIOS. You can still exchange the overclocking profiles if you want.
But again, keep in mind that no single CPU is the same.
Nope.
So Peter actually tried this because we both have a B650 motherboard, and we both run a 5600X CPU.
Yeah,
and I had a certain curve optimizer setting for my undervolting, and basically Peter copy-pasted my settings, but it didn't work for his.
Yeah, that's
so
true. This
the
trial and
undervolt
error.
of my CPU didn't work on his CPU.
Yeah.
So yeah, it doesn't always work.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah, undervolting and overclocking always is
Very
trial and
CPU
error,
specific.
and yeah, every system is a little bit different. So the limit is also on will be different. Okay, so I skipped one, is the MSI performance preset. So if you build your system for the first time or boot it up for the first time, change the CPU, you probably will be greeted with this page. With Intel nowadays, we're obliged to set the Intel default settings nowadays. In the Raptor Lake days, we got some changes, and before everything was on MSI unlimited settings, and then you can get a lot of performance, but also a lot of power draw, and could get more unstable quicker. Now it's all on Intel default settings, even the Raptor Lakes, so that's 13 and 14 gen Intels. But that will also mean it will limit the power and will be a little bit more power economic.
And these are just presets, but these are also settings that you can manually set in the advanced mode of the BIOS. But later on we will show more details about that.
If you want to do overclocking, just go with the MSI unlimited settings, because nobody's going to guarantee stability with overclocking anyway. So then the MSI unlimited settings just removes all the safety features and
the barriers, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So you won't run into any protections that would hamper your overclock. Yeah, that's basically it.
See a question in Twitch chat. FRC Eagle is asking: is it possible to sync PC case fan curve with GPU fans from the BIOS?
Yeah, it's not possible from the BIOS. We've asked for this several times, and apparently that's a tricky one to go to ask from the BIOS. Yeah. It's possible through software, but not through the BIOS.
So the BIOS really controls the motherboard and, for example, stuff that is really installed on the motherboard, like in the CPU socket or the memory modules. Yeah. A graphics card, of course, is kind of a separate system on a separate PCB in that.
Exactly,
sense.
and it might be possible to load like an AMD or Intel or NVIDIA driver for graphics, but I think it will be too much effort to maintain and also double checking and
so very difficult at this point.
Yeah, difficult, and probably is not the job of the BIOS engineer for the motherboard. So I think they say, oh, we're going to move that to the software team. Yeah. Not sure if you can do that in our MSI center though. I've asked for that also several times.
So graphics card still, if you want to set up a Vanguard through software. Or of course, on certain cards where we have a BIOS switch, then you, for example, have like a gaming BIOS and a silent BIOS. That will also influence the fan curve.
Yeah. Also, some motherboards, they come with like a thermal sensor and like a thermal probe. It's a wire with a thermal resistor on it. You could even squeeze that into the fan or the heatsink of the the GPU and let the fans trigger on that.
Yeah.
So
if your
but it's
GPU
more
is
the
hotter-
advanced motherboards, probably also on the MEGs.
Yeah.
So the Ace and the Godlike, so only for the very high end.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
that's another possibility. Yeah. One thing I want to say about the MSI performance preset, we also have that on AMD, but basically has PBO and PBO. The choices are PBO auto or PBO enabled, which sounds very similar to me. But what it does is PBO disabled, that's auto.
Auto
and
is basically disabled. Yeah.
yeah, the naming is a bit weird, but yeah, the default is just turn PBO off and run on AMD recommended settings as well. Okay. Profiles we covered. Favorites. Favorites I can also explain on this part. We have an easy config. These are just presets made by MSI. So we think this could be useful for some people. But you can also switch this menu to favorite 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in total. And then go back to easy. So at the moment we have nothing here. But for example, if you want to go to, for example, let's power management, and we want to add restore after AC power loss, we can right click and then add that one to favorite menu 1. And if we go back to easy mode, then you can find this here. So you can create your own favorites menu here with the options you like to see
So
in
basically
the
you
easy
can drag
mode.
the options out of advanced mode and get them in the easy mode.
Yeah,
Specifically the ones you want to have there.
yeah. So if you have any favorite options that you tweak a lot, then just put them there. And then it's in this menu as well, and you don't have to search through all the menus in advanced mode. That's basically what it does.
And also if you want to separate, for example, certain CPU settings and memory settings, you could use like favorite one for a couple of
true. Yeah,
CPU
yeah. Or
presets.
one for voltages,
Favorite,
or
yeah.
one for stuff like that.
Skeets is asking even PCIe settings. Yeah,
Yeah.
those as well.
Yeah, anything in advanced mode that you can see as a text option, you can right click and then it will give you the option to move it to one of the favorites menus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also easy on off buttons. These are just selection of buttons that we thought was useful for some people. For example, the TPM enabled or disabled. For Windows 11 nowadays you need that. If you have older Click BIOS 5, then probably the default is disabled, so you can enable it and then install Windows 11 if your CPU supports that. There's some other stuff as well. So the CPU has another cogwheel here, and if you click it, you will go to the core center. There's a CPU and a memory part. This will just tell you a little bit about the CPU. Not really useful or not that useful. You probably already know what specs your CPU has.
So no settings, just information.
Just information, yeah. For the memory, it's a little bit different. It has a little bit more information. There's also some temperatures here. Oh, one it says not applicable. Okay, anyway. You see the memory profile. So this is the JEDEC standard. Now it's called JEDEC standard, and with the easy menu it's called standard. These are basically the timings you will see if you clear the CMOS or if you first start the PC. Then you can also scroll through the XMP profiles and see also the sub-timings and XMP2 and XMP3 and go back to the standard again. Anyway, for fan profiles, it's another button to click hardware monitoring. So you can just go back to a hardware monitor page.
And it's nicely animated with the fans.
Yeah, if you can make the BIOS a little bit smaller, then we can also see the boot priority part. We're covering that part at the moment. So here's the ribbon with the boot devices, and it's like the old one, so you can just drag and drop anything you might have. I think there's a lot of stuff here like floppy. Not many people still use floppies to boot from.
But it's still there. It's still there.
It's still there, yeah. I think a USB key can be useful sometimes for troubleshooting, and CDs and DVDs. Not sure if many people will still use those to boot from. but this is about the easy mode. So yeah, I think this is covering most of the easy mode, I would say.
Okay, then let's head over to advanced mode.
Yeah, so if you press F7, then you will go to advanced mode. You can also click the button to switch. That's the same. So first it will just give you the system status, which is very similar to Click BIOS 5. System time and date, you can also change the time, and we'll also show you the SATA and the M.2 storage SSD or hard drives, and also the BIOS version. For Intel, sometimes important also the ME version and how much physical memory you have in there, but that's also shown here in the information pane. The system status is not that advanced. It has also some DMI information, but this is more for system integrators, I would say. Advanced mode or advanced, because we're already at power management, it just remembers that. So let's go to the first one first. There was a question about PCI Express modes or generation modes. You can set that for the M.2s, but also for the PCI Express slots. So nowadays we were getting motherboards that support PCI Express Gen 5, and the new graphics card from NVIDIA also support PCI Express Gen 5, and normally that just works. But if you have like a PCI Express riser in between them, then it's possible that the riser will interfere with the signals, and it won't run a Gen 5 anymore. So then you
because
need to
cannot
go
handle Gen 5. And
exactly.
Then
So
issues,
you need to plug in the card into the slot, set the BIOS settings, or use the integrated graphics to go to the BIOS and change the slot mode, not to Gen 5, but to Gen 4 or Gen 3, depending on the riser cable you have. Also, there's with some cards, some motherboards, you get extra cards to put M.2s in, and you can split the lanes in a different way. So 844 is also possible.
But this is something that is very dependent on the specific motherboard that you're using as well.
Yeah, exactly. So on this motherboard, it has no function because you don't get a riser card for M.2s in it.
Yeah.
There. Or riser card, just a regular add-on card, sorry. There's a lot of stuff like resizable bar that used to be a thing, especially for Intel graphics cards. It's necessary to be enabled, but it's enabled by default on newer platforms anyway. So if you're looking for this one, it's in the advanced and PCIe section, also on the older motherboards, older BIOSes, sorry. So ACPI settings is not that interesting, except for maybe the temperature display on the debug code. So if your motherboard has a post LED, when the BIOS is booting, it will show you all kinds of codes, and if it doesn't give you any image on the display, you can check the post LED and see where it stopped and figure out what went wrong. A lot of common things are memory and stuff like that.
Just for clarification, by the way, there are two versions. You have Easy Debug LED, so that's basically a row of 4 small LEDs that show, is it a CPU issue, is it a memory issue, is it a VGA issue. But there is also some, especially higher end motherboards usually, they have like a tiny display that can show an error code.
Yeah, it's
and that one you can set also to display the temperature.
Exactly, and that's what this option is for. So normally the CPU temperature will be shown once the BIOS is done booting and the control is handed over to the OS. Then it will start showing the CPU core temperature. So
then, for example, when you have a transparent side window, you look into your system and you can see, for example, 50 on the screen, and your CPU is 50 degrees.
It's 50 degrees, but you can change that also to a different temperature sensor on the motherboard. That's also possible. Power LEDs, it's still used, but not that much anymore, I would say. Integrated peripherals. Sometimes people want to disable stuff. Yeah, that's fine if you want to disable the LAN. I think you can. You cannot disable the SATA. I think here, but you can enable the whole plug SATA. But not sure if that will be used by many people.
I
Sometimes
think in the
audio,
past with eSATA it was more of a thing to hot plug them, but internally,
yeah.
it's
But
not
some people
very-
want to disable the Wi-Fi or even the onboard LAN or the onboard audio. That's possible here. Okay, so Thunderbolt. Nowadays, the Intel, the 800 series motherboards, most of them have, or at least the Z890s have, Thunderbolt, and you can enable that. And yeah, it's enabled by default, so yeah, probably don't need to touch it. USB, basically the same, but you can also disable it per port. So you cannot do that with SATA, but you can do it with USB. This is sometimes also requested by some SI as well. The other stuff is just legacy stuff. USB, normally you don't need to set up anything. Power management, the only thing sometimes interesting is the restore after AC power loss. So if your electricity is stopped for any reason and it comes back on because you resetted the fuse in your fuse box, and what do you want to do with the system? If it's a system that does all kinds of stuff, maybe it's a server, then you probably want to do a power on for when the power gets back. For most other stuff, power off is probably fine. You can also set it to last state. So if it was on before the power went out, then it will just power on. If it was off, it will stay off.
Yeah.
That's basically it.
Skeets is asking, was it every single USB port on the board in the previous menu with all the...
Yeah, the numbering is not really clear. So if you say USB port 0 and 1, I have no clue
which one is it. Is
where.
It a Type A?
Yeah.
Is it a Type C?
Yeah.
So that can be complicated. Yeah, you can of course find out with trial and error.
This one is not documented, at least not publicly available.
But this is also something that I think 99.9% of users would never touch. It doesn't really make sense to disable a USB port.
It could be a great one for April Fools if you just disable some part and
and don't tell the other person you
will go nuts. Really.
I see another question in chat. Where is the firmware for Windows 11 as FTPM firmware, I guess? I'm not sure if I understand the question.
We will get to the security part in a bit, and that's about the TPM. The F in front of that TPM means firmware TPM, which basically means that the TPM module is on the CPU and runs basically in software or firmware. So
there are also physical TPM modules?
Yeah, that's what we call discrete TPMs, and that's a physical card you plug into the JTPM
header. The header,
But they're not used anymore that much, only for really secure stuff. Then firmware is always easier to hack than a hardware security chip, I would say.
But for home users, FTPM is the common way.
For most people, you just want to go to Windows 11, then you need TPM. Some people like to also use the encryption of the hard drive, and then firmware TPM is fine. But some businesses or maybe government, they need more restrictions or more security, then you will go with this.
With the hardware
TPM.
module.
We also get the request for some laptops as well. That needs to be discrete TPM for them. But
I see another question by Pandorian Gray. Can you show us the advanced power configurations like AC/DC, LL, etc.? Would be nice if there was more explanation on tooltips instead of MSI mode 1 through 17.
Yeah, we will come to that.
We will also go through
the OC menu. And this is basically it's an Intel feature mostly. For AMD, it's not that interesting. I think if you want to do undervolting with AMD, you would go to the curve optimizer, and for Intel, you could use the AC and DC load line, especially the AC load line.
Mr. Masterdox is asking, when are we going to get AI motherboards that simply do the curve optimizer and everything automatically by a click of a button, and one that can adjust the values automatically if there seems to be any instability issues? That's what I want.
With a smiley. I don't have the answer to that. Maybe you can ask ChatGPT and they will come up with an answer when.
If it's accurate, still remains to be seen.
Yeah, but predictions, I'm not very good at predictions.
We do, of course, have some settings kind of like that, like memory triad, for example, but it's not exactly.
I think our marketing once stated already that OC Genie was AI.
Yeah, not really.
I hear somebody coughing. He was doing marketing at that time, I think. Anyway, but yeah, what is AI, right? So yeah, it depends.
Another question, Elmer's asking on Facebook, resizable bar is showing off an NVIDIA control panel, but in BIOS it's set as on. What could be the issue?
Good question, yeah. And maybe the drivers, I would say, but it depends also on how old is your BIOS and stuff. Could be a bug. Yeah, I think for all modern chipsets and BIOSes, it should be on by default, and there shouldn't be a problem. Could also be that the graphics card is a little bit older and the VGA BIOS is not supporting that yet. There was a time, I'm not sure when. I think it was with the GTX 1660s and stuff. There were some BIOSes that could not enable resizable bar. But also depends on the graphic card, of course.
Okay.
But also some time ago. Let's move on to wake-up events. While wake-up events is not used that much, one thing people like to use is wake on LAN, and then you need to enable resume by PCI Express or networking device.
You use this, right?
I use it, yeah. I have a desktop that's also my Plex media server, and it's in sleep mode most of the time, but when I want to watch a movie from Plex, I just wake it up with wake on LAN, so I don't have to get up and push the button.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you do this, resume any of these features, it means more circuitry on the board will be powered on all the time. So it's powered by 5-volt standby from the power supply. Also means it will consume slightly slightly more power in standby mode or in sleep mode or in off mode even, so S5 mode. And you can also see that in power management setup, ERP ready by default is enabled, so saving power. And once you do the wake on LAN, for example,
it overrides it basically,
yeah, it
and
automatically disables that part. So I think that's something new. Before you need to manually toggle that. Click BIOS configuration. There's a slide animation for this one. You can disable it. You can also choose which home page you will go to once you start or go back to the BIOS.
This is stuff that I would usually disable, slide animations. I'm not the biggest fan of stuff sliding in and out of the screen.
The weird part is now it's not sliding, but sometimes it is, so not sure. What I would like to see instead of slide animation, don't show this hiding. I mean, I just want to see the whole menu
it on front,
all the
basically,
time. But I already conveyed my suggestions, but they haven't.
But that's also the thing, of course, always with the new BIOS version. Like Click BIOS 5, when it came out, was also not the Click BIOS 5 that we had at the very end. That we still have.
Now it's still evolving.
Exactly. So Click BIOS X or 10 in a couple of years will get updates over time, so will look different and also function different in a certain way.
Yeah, hopefully we will just improve as we go along.
We always try to fine-tune it further.
Secure erase of the SSD. Not many people will use it, but maybe if you want to sell your SSD and you want to make sure it's really cleaned, then there's also other tools to do this. But this one was in Click BIOS 5 already. MSI driver utility installer enabled by default. So once you go into Windows, then it will have a pop-up and say, do you want to install drivers and stuff? And then it will just annoy you about Norton antivirus as well. You can disable that in the BIOS as well if you think that's annoying. Yeah,
so disable it here and you don't get the pop-up anymore in Windows.
Once you've gotten the pop-up, then and you've clicked cancel and stuff, then it won't
Then
pop
it
up
also
anymore,
displays, yeah.
unless you, for example, have a MSI mouse again or some other new MSI stuff, then it will pop up again.
Yeah.
And you can disable that.
Andrew is asking on YouTube chat, hello, can you tell me how to completely disable RAM allocation for integrated graphics on the Z890X? The size is set to 0, but Windows says 95.6 out of 96 gigabytes are available.
I think you can't. And it's not just the integrated graphics that will take memory. Also, there is a window reserved for to port data to your graphics card, even not the integrated one, but the discrete graphics card.
So that's where you will always lose a little bit?
Yeah. In the past it was a lot more. Some people say that it even was 1.5 gigabytes that you lose. There was a whole thing. I think it's already probably around 10 years ago, I would say. Yeah, but it's a long time ago. Integrated graphics, you can not disable it. Did I skip this one? Yeah, I did. Why didn't I do this one? You can say which one you want to enable first, but you cannot disable it completely. I think going to 0 will not disable it completely either, because what you set here is how much dedicated RAM you give the integrated graphics, but there's also a dynamic part, so the driver will handle that part. And we have the IGD multi-monitor. If you disable this one, it's possible that it will disable the integrated graphics, but I'm not sure. Oh, this one is actually dedicated there for this one. We had an issue with the first BIOSes of the Arrow Lake. If you install Windows, it will blue screen because the once you install the NVIDIA graphics driver, because it conflicts with the integrated graphics if you didn't install that driver first.
So it was about the sequence where
for the one who asked the question before, it was Andrew or?
Yeah, Andrew.
This one, integrated graphics control, if you set this one to disabled, then the integrated graphics is disabled completely. That works on Intel 800 series motherboards, but I don't know if that's also the case for older BIOSes. I don't think so.
See another question in chat. Panagiotis13 is asking, good evening everyone from Greece. I want to ask something. I ordered from official computer shop here in Greece the MSI MAG B650 Tomahawk Wi-Fi motherboard and Ryzen 7 7700X CPU. When I want to put this CPU, this motherboard comes already with 7000 series ready, or I can do BIOS update to put the CPU. I ordered for my new PC and also something else on this motherboard. Can I put a GPU which is 10 years old, which has PCI Express 3.0x16? For the last one, very easy. Yes, PCI Express is backwards compatible. You can put older generations of graphics card in newer motherboards without any issues. It will automatically go to PCI Express 3.0 basically. Let me see if I understand the other question. So the B650 Tomahawk Wi-Fi, that one should by default support 7000 series. It is AM5, so it can also support 8000 or 9000 series, but in that case you may need to do a BIOS update, because out of the box it may still be an earlier BIOS version, also depending on how long that motherboard has been with the retailer or etc.
We will show you how you can do that if the CPU would not be supported, and it's called BIOS flash button. We will demo that as well. Yeah,
and that, by the way, will also work on your B650 board. But keep in mind that your B650 board, like the BIOS itself, is still Click BIOS 5. So that is different from what we're showing here today.
But the process for
the flash BIOS button is
identical.
Still the same.
Okay, so we covered the advanced part. So the overclocking I'm going to skip because we'll come back to that. Security part, you could set up a password for administrator and also user. So once you want to go into the BIOS, you need to enter a password, but if you also have a user password, then every time it boots before Windows, you need to enter a password. Some people want to be really secure, and then it's possible. It's also possible not to enter a password, but to have a security key on a USB stick. It's called uKey, and you can enable that and make uKey at execution level to enforce. Then the enforcing is saved to the BIOS chip, and if you do a clear CMOS, you still cannot enter the BIOS until you enter the correct USB key. So it's a quite secure but also dangerous feature, because if you lose the USB stick, you will never be able to boot anymore. And this has happened in the past. In the past, the default would be
So you basically
the enforced
brick it,
one. Yeah, exactly. So you need to send it to RMA, and they will remove the flash ROM, reprogram it, and then
you can use
solder it
again.
back.
Yeah.
That's basically what they do.
Yeah.
Or they have a tool for that to flash it externally. But yeah, if you don't need it, just disable this part. It's disabled by default. Trusted computing, that's the
Question in chat, Skeets is asking, will RMA accept that?
they have to, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
It was a common, we bundled a USB key, a MSI uKey, same name, very, very long time ago. It was, I think, the first socket A motherboards and stuff like that, very long time ago. And also people lost that key, and then we got RMA because it was too secure. Yeah, anyway.
So yes, it
Long
is
time ago.
accepted, but probably you don't want to go through the
Yeah.
hassle.
No, they accepted it then, so I expect it to be accepted now. The firmware version here, it says TPM, means it's the TPM functionality from the Intel CPU. That's also why the vendor abbreviation is INT-C, or Intel Corporation. You can set up some stuff. Normally the default would be fine for any reason, like BitLocker or Windows 11 installation, just leave it default. Chassis intrusion, not a lot of cases have a chassis intrusion switch, so not being used too much anymore. Secure boot, you can enable and disable it. It needs to be secure boot capable for Windows 11, but it doesn't need to be enabled to install, as far as I know. Secure boot, better leave it on. It's always better than turning it off. Secure is not a dirty word. The boot sequence, boot order is also available in text, so you can select here.
So basically it does the same as what you will see here on the bottom?
Yeah, exactly. But here it's in text, and also you can see which drive is the priority, even if you have more than one hard drive, or here it says hard disk drive, but it can also be an SSD, no problem. Hard drive would be a better name. But if you have more drives that have an OS on it, it will show up here, and you can change the order here. So that's also possible. Also some stuff you can change. You can disable the logo. You can go to BIOS enabling, and if you press the power button for 4 seconds, then it will go into BIOS setup.
So if you disable the logo, you will just see the standard post screen, basically, right?
Yeah. I haven't tried it for a long time. I haven't tried it on this one, so no idea how it will look.
I think I have it disabled at home. I just get the post screen when
okay, yeah. Usually it just boots and just walk away, or
it doesn't really matter for most people.
Numlock state, stuff like that you can, and fast boot, usually it doesn't save that much time. That for AMD we have another option to save boot time than this. Okay, so almost there with the advanced part. You can just press escape if you made changes and you don't want them to be saved, then, or you can press discard changes and exit. Save changes and reboot is the same as the F10. Save changes if you want to do in between saves, that's also possible. Restore default is the same as the F6. But also if you want to do only once a boot from a different drive, like if you want to boot from this stick, then you click that one. at the moment it's not possible. It's a DOS boot stick, but you need to disable secure boot to do that. But if it's a WinPE or other drive, then or a Linux that is capable for secure boot, then you can just do a boot override there. So this is the advanced menu, and then we can go to the overclocking part for Intel.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
So first we talk about Intel. If you're interested in AMD, make sure to stay, because after this part we will also basically go through the same type of menu but then for AMD, because there are some differences between the two, so that's why we think it's useful to show both of them.
Some stuff is of course very much the same or similar, but there's also a lot of stuff that's a bit different. For example,
sometimes also different naming for similar things.
Yeah, one example of that is in the DRAM settings. We have memory extension mode for Intel, and we have a memory efficiency mode for
high efficiency mode.
High efficiency mode, and that's
for AMD.
For Intel, we also have a high efficiency mode, but that's a subsection of memory extension mode.
So it can be a bit confusing.
Can be confusing,
but
yes.
Basically it does a similar thing. So it optimizes your sub timings for better performance in certain situations.
Indeed, yeah. The differences between these modes is not that much. One of the settings that it changes, which gives you the most performance benefit already at the lowest level, is the REFI timing. That's the refresh interval. So if you slow down or make the refresh interval very long, then it won't refresh as much, and it will have more time to do data transfers, and that means it will be quicker. So less latency and higher bandwidth. That's basically what it does.
So Burak's asking on YouTube, could you please publish new BIOS for MEG X570 motherboard? The MEG logo is obsolete. Well, we've just demonstrated a setting that also works on Click BIOS 5, where you can just disable the MEG logo if you want. Then you just get the post screen, and you don't get the old logo if you don't want to see that one.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So the DRAM settings basically are very similar for AMD and Intel. Only Intel, it's called usually is XMP, Extreme Memory Profile, or XMP, and for AMD normally the memory profile is called Expo or AXMP, so the AMD version of XMP. So if you have XMP modules,
support it the other way around. So on Intel boards, at least
Expo
MSI
is supported, and on AMD motherboards, XMP is also supported. So for the user, it doesn't really matter.
No.
The profiles, if you select them here, it will also show you here what the resulting speed will be. There's another stuff on DDR5 is the gear mode. So actually on DDR4 it was also gear 1 and gear 2. Now we have gear 2, gear 4, and it means if you go above a certain frequency, you need to set gear 4, otherwise then it will not be stable anymore. Basically,
but this is only when you're running like extremely high frequencies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm not sure what the cutoff speed is exactly, but on the Z890 is really, really high, and for AMD it's already lower because up to 6,000. Yeah, it's a little different. It doesn't call gear mode anymore. We'll talk about that later on.
Yeah.
For Z890 and the Arrow Lake or the 200 series CPU, the memory compatibility or high-speed memory compatibility is really good and improved compared to the older Intels. So 7200, no problem.
Memory overclocking records with this new generation.
And you have the CU DIMM, so that also helps a lot, reaching higher memory frequencies. Of course, you can set up the ratio modes. The traditional way of overclocking is to run all cores at the same speed, locked at one frequency. But nowadays, it's more interesting to do like a turbo ratio or a turbo ratio offset. So it just uses the turbo ratios of the CPU, and you can just, for example, add oh, here's the value. So just do +2 and then you have 200 megahertz more. But depending on the CPU, depending on the system, you don't know if it will be stable, but you can play around with that.
That's always with overclocking, a lot of trial and error to see
Trial
what
and
works
error,
and what
yeah.
doesn't.
What I've seen so far, and I only did limited overclocking on this platform, is that the P-core is, you cannot reach that much more with the P-cores. They are already tuned very, set to the limit, I would say, and the E-cores have a little bit more a margin, so you can.
Also makes sense that Intel pushed the P-cores further because they have to really perform, where the E have to be efficient. So usually they're more conservative with those settings out of the box.
Also, the Arrow Lake is a little bit different because the power. The power delivery is also done inside the CPU, so the power circuit on the motherboard just delivers a stable power voltage to the CPU, and the CPU steps it down to the correct V-core voltage. You can disable that, but I haven't had time to play around with that too much. Only played with this one, and the E-core ratio, if you do +200, that was still stable on this one. More, but only tested for a short period, so I'm not sure how far you can stretch this, and it also depends on the cooling, the CPU, and everything.
That's also the fun of it, to see how far you can go.
Yeah, that's the key. So this is what they call dynamic overclocking. So CPU will still behave with downclock and upclock and try to overclock a little bit.
So with the boost and stuff like that.
Yeah, with boost, enabled. And if you do the static overclock, then it's more for the people who want to achieve the highest record and do like a short time overclock. And the dynamic overclock is more for people who want to do like a 24/7 overclock, just have free performance, if you will.
Because it still behaves more like normal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it also is still efficient. If you do nothing, then it doesn't consume loads of power as well, and it doesn't run at insane voltages and make your CPU hot and stuff. AVX control, not that interesting, I would say. Only if you do stress tests that involve AVX and stuff. Not many programs use AVX in that regard. The ring ratio and the NGU ratio and the die-to-die ratio, that's something new for Arrow Lake. You can play around with that if you overclock it too much, you might need to lower the ratio. And there's a lot of stuff I didn't play with yet, so I have no idea what dial to change, but there's a lot of people on the internet who have and can tell you more about that. What I've read so far is that Arrow Lake is not the best overclocker, also because of the tile-based setup.
But that's then CPU overclocking, because for memory it is.
Oh, memory is very good, very good. Yeah, I had less issues with 7200 this kit than with the Arrow Lake than with the previous generation. Also, the DRAM timings you can change, and this is very similar. This is the same on AMD and Intel. And for example, if you want to do troubleshooting, the first thing you can change is the command rate and the CAS latency. If it says 40 and it's not stable, just put 42 or 44 or whatever. That's the first step you can do. With DDR4, there's another step you can take, and that's add more DRAM voltage, but for DDR5 it doesn't really help.
As much as
sometimes even lower voltage helps more than more voltage, because
temperature can hurt.
There's a power chip on the DDR5 module itself that supplies the voltage to the DRAM chips.
Yeah, the PMIC. That was basically on the motherboard, and now they moved it to the memory module.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So voltages for DDR5 doesn't really help that much.
Not like in the past, at least.
No. Also, some people say you need to put like a fan on the fan on the DIMMs, but didn't see that much difference, I would say. But anyway, then we go to the voltages. Of course, V-core voltage mode. At the moment, you can do some override mode, but it's changing only the power supply to the power delivery inside the CPU. So the power delivery inside the CPU that's still controlling how much voltage the cores will get. So this part is less interesting on Arrow Lake at the moment, unless you change the setting in what is called, we're all the way up here, advanced CPU configuration. There's a lot of stuff here that's interesting as well. Let's go in there. So if you want to disable some cores for testing, or if you want to disable all the E-cores, that's possible, or a few E-cores, that's also possible. You have the control there. You can also disable the C states and the sleep modes. That's the core sleep modes. For static overclocking, stuff like that usually gets disabled.
Yeah.
And also here you can toggle the power limits. Basically the same as you can do in the MSI preset performance, setting everything to unlimited. You can also set it to
PL1, PL2.
Yeah, and you can just enter any, if you want to see a 300, oh, sorry. My typing is really bad. Oh wait, if I move the mouse, then it doesn't work the way I think it should work. That's crazy.
Can you try 200?
Yeah, but I should be able to set. Oh, maybe it's because we didn't change it.
Oh, because it was limiting it maybe to.
No.
No?
No, it's a weird issue. How about short? Can we do short? Maybe we just need to press the plus, but my keyboard doesn't have a. This is really weird.
Looks like keyboard issue. Because you seem to be able to go higher.
Oh wow, that's a great one. I could do plus and then go all the way up there. Yeah, we can try. We have a
keyboard replacement.
Yeah, a very fancy one this time. No, kidding. Let's see if the
That one's green, that's going to be difficult.
Now my mouse is not responding anymore. That's also great. Come on. Oh, did I unplug the wrong one? Yeah, I did. Sorry, my bad. I have two white cables and one was keyboard, one was mouse.
Was the mouse.
Of course, I was unplugging the wrong one. So if I do 450, no. No, it's a bug. Yeah, we found a bug. Okay. So with this one, I can set it.
And for that one, we need to fix it.
It's still weird. Now it works. Sort of. I don't know. We will check it and update it. There is one BIOS update I haven't tried yet because I want to update MFlash with this system. So maybe it's fixed in.
Maybe we can check after we did.
I haven't tested that one. So
later on, we'll also demonstrate how to
crossed.
update the BIOS, and then we'll check if that actually fixes this one.
This part is the important part for the CPU power delivery inside the CPU. If you if it's enabled, means it's controlled by the CPU, and if you want to disable that, you get a warning that you're in control of the power towards the cores, and it might get dangerous. So please change it at your own risk. That's what it says. Also, the CPU light load. We had a question about that before with AC and DC load line. Is basically called CPU light load control. Not so interesting for Arrow Lake at the moment because it has the inside in the CPU power delivery, so you cannot control it as good as before. But if you set CPU light load control to advanced, it's no longer showing you mode 1 to 17 like before, but it just calls it AC load line and DC load line like Intel is also calling it.
Mr. Mestrock says in Twitch chat, almost like none has ever tried to change these settings. Well, PL1 and PL2, I would say, are quite common settings to set, because they're basically power limits. I also have them set manually in my BIOS in my own PC.
Power limits are also a great way if you have a limited cooling solution or a smaller case and you want.
So like mini ITX,
exactly.
I have very limited space.
Then you can just set up the power limit and then it will never overheat. That's a great way.
You may lose performance, of course, depending on how tight you set the power limit.
That's actually how the PL1 and PL2 were designed, is that you are in control as a system integrator of the cooling solution and also the power delivery. But what I've seen in the past a lot, and there's also what people are complaining about, is that they buy a pre-built system and the power limits are not set and it's overheating out of the box, just right from the shop. And if you run a stress test on it, it goes to 99 degrees. Then why didn't you set the power limit?
Yeah, that should have been preset. Yeah, especially if you buy a pre-built system. That
exactly, and that's a very common mistake. I've seen it also happen in MSI.
Question in YouTube chat, Burak's asking, will disabling C states affect performance in a positive way?
Not really, but it just means it will not put the cores in real sleep states anymore. The C state is a core sleep state, I would say. And waking up can take some microseconds, but usually you don't really notice that part. But in the past there was some benchmark that would be affected by seed states, but
in general usage,
not really. No. It also means that your CPU all cores will be turned on all the time. So it
will consume more power than necessary, basically. Yeah.
In the past, it would have some benefit with certain games as well, but very limited. Then we're talking about, like at the time, CS:GO with 700 or 800 FPS. Yeah. So if you want to control the AC and DC load line, basically how it works is the AC load line controls.
Yeah, so we had a question about this earlier.
Yeah, the voltages. So the lower you set it, the lower the V-core voltage in load will be applied. So there you can basically dynamically undervolt the CPU. Yeah. What you should set for the DC load line is basically the same as the AC load line. That's Intel's recommendation. And the DC load line doesn't control how much power or how much voltage the CPU gets, but it only determines how much power is reported. So if you, for example, have HW info running with the sensors page open and it says CPU package power, if you don't change the DC load line, but you did change the AC load line, the power reading is incorrect. So if you set it to the same value as the AC load line, the CPU package power reading will be more correct again. Yeah. So that's where you use it for. If you don't want to mess with all that, you just set CPU light load control to normal, and if the default is, for example, in this case, mode 17, just set a lower mode and it will try to undervolt it. If it's unstable, go a few modes higher. Yeah.
So again, trial and error to see what you can do.
And then you can save some power. But again, on Arrow Lake, I've tried it. It didn't work because of the power delivery inside the CPU.
But if you have an older generation Intel...
Yeah, for 13 and 14 and even older models, the CPU light load is a very good tool to get more efficiency, because the performance will not decrease that much or not at all, and the power will decrease substantially.
Yeah. Nuts_O is asking on YouTube chat. Also, can we get better and more information for the AI silicon prediction, like per core / CCD, SP, and also auto OC with predefined presets, and maybe like a slider for how aggressive, please? It's a very difficult thing.
I think that's a good marketing question. You can answer that one.
Yeah. Usually with these kind of things, it is very hard to get it right for all CPUs simultaneously. So at this point, at least, it is mostly trial and error still. Yeah. If you want to do like more automatic things, There are certain BIOS options, but basically it never gets you as far as when you do everything individually.
In the past, we also had like silicon quality readings and stuff like that, but it didn't really. Yeah.
It is also a very tricky one. So let's, if I take my own PC at home as an example, so I use Curve Optimizer, AMD system with an undervolt, and there you can set the undervolt for all cores simultaneously, or you can set it per individual core.
Yeah.
The silicon.
Did you the per core?
No, because it took too much time.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you really want to optimize it, that's the way to go, because silicon quality for the whole CPU is kind of vague, because one core can perform very well while the other is not as good. So if you really want to get the maximum out of it, and this will take a lot of time if you run, for example, a 16 core. I only have a 6 core, so I could
the last 1% gain takes you 99% of the time.
Yeah.
And that's where I also lose out, because I don't have the time. Yeah.
I also think it is too much work to really define it, but it is
the
true
controls
that
are there if you want to play with it.
And the differences can also be quite significant. So certain cores you can run at a way bigger undervolt than others.
Yeah, and usually also the lower amount of cores, then Curve Optimizer can be more aggressive than with the higher core.
Yeah, so like a Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7 will usually go further than the Ryzen 9s,
exactly.
for example.
That's what we've seen so far. Yeah.
I see another question in the chat. Drive-by is asking, is 21:9 aspect ratio for the BIOS also supported?
No, at the moment it's just 1920 by 1080.
So 16:9.
1080p is the resolution, and depending on how your monitor treats that, it will.
By the way, if you're running an 800 series Intel or AMD and you're already running Click BIOS X, but you haven't updated your BIOS, it is also possible that your resolution is still lower, because the 1080p.
Yeah, the first one was 720p.
720p indeed, and now the newer releases are 1080p.
Yeah.
So if you never updated your BIOS and you're running an 800 series, it is possible that it's still on 720p.
Yeah. You will see the difference immediately if you update the BIOS. Then especially the text
sharper.
will be much sharper.
Yeah.
Looks a lot better in my opinion. Yeah.
Can you switch or select a specific resolution for the BIOS?
No, it's not switchable.
So basically you update the BIOS, then you will get the 1080p.
I don't know if you still have a monitor that's not supporting 1080p.
We should test that one if we have a very old monitor.
I don't think I have a monitor though. Yeah, maybe.
We can find one for you.
But it only has VGA connector. So I'm looking for a graphic card with VGA connector.
That's got to be a challenge.
That's gonna challenge, yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would say in general nowadays no one really uses, at least not external monitors anymore that are lower than full HD resolution.
I don't think so, yeah. But that will be, I don't think it will happen much. There are some protections as well that you can play with. For example, the CPU over temperature protection normally for the newer ones like Arrow Lake, it's up to 105 degrees. For the older ones it was 100, but you can even stretch it up to 115. So, scrolling is different than I thought. 115 is the max, but that's only if you want to do really extreme overclocks and you're in full control of the cooling. So, for example, with liquid nitrogen or stuff like that, and you can play with this one. But but it can be a bit risky. It can be risky. Only if you're not in control with the cooling, then it will could kill you your CPU.
For setting records, yes, fine if you want to use these kind of settings.
Yeah, but it's risky.
Yeah, but if for a system that you're running 24/7 and you want to continue using it for a longer period of time, probably don't put it that high.
Also, one thing I want to highlight is the CEP support is the current excursion protection. It's enabled by default. It's also because of the Intel recommended settings we need to set. This one is enabled by default. This used to be disabled on, for example, the 13 and 14 gen, and that could lower the voltages. But what lower voltages also do is that the peak currents will go up, and that's what this protection will dampen and try to reduce. So then also the performance will drop. So if the excursion is not possible anymore because of this protection, then it will just kill performance.
Yeah.
So if you're undervolting quite a bit on, for example, a 14 gen, and you enable CEP, then just performance will drop. If you disable this one, then the current peaks will go up, but the performance will not drop, and your power consumption will still be very low.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a trade-off. So
really a setting that can be useful if you're undervolting.
Yeah, you're trading a risky setting for
performance.
Yeah, for performance and efficiency.
Yeah.
So to enable it means it's safer, but it will be less efficient, so it consumes more power for the same performance.
It's an interesting question by a random guy on YouTube. So why do they put CU-DIMM on X870E if it's not ready? Isn't it better to put support on the next generation? Basically, CU-DIMM, like the functionality of CU-DIMM is kind of bypassed, so an AMD system would run it like a regular DDR5 module. Which also means that if you already want to purchase a CU-DIMM, that you can use it. So it doesn't make sense to remove support, because then if you have one of these modules, it wouldn't work, whereas they could still run as a normal DDR5 module. So the CU-DIMM itself isn't supported in the sense that you don't benefit from having a CU-DIMM over a regular DIMM, but you can still use it if you want to.
Yeah.
So I personally, I think it is better to
How many
keep this
CU-DIMMs
open.
also are rated for higher frequencies, and usually you're not able to get those frequencies running on AMD.
No.
And also on Intel, you can only run it with CU-DIMM support enabled, but it's enabled by default. So you
also
really
all those
disable
memory
it.
records are also with CU-DIMMs on Intel Arrow Lake.
On supported Intels. Yeah, and basically only the 200 series CPUs can do it at the moment. So this is, in a nutshell, the overclocking settings. There's a lot of voltages you can still play with, and especially on older platforms for Intel, it's interesting. Also the load line calibration, but that's with a fixed voltage usually, and also with fixed overclock. And this load line calibration control is for fixed voltages only. So we talked about CPU light load and AC load line as a dynamic undervolt or overvolt is also possible. This one is for fixed voltages. So it's both is called load line calibration, but one is dynamic and the other one is fixed. So that's the distinction between those two. So this one is more for the LN2 overclockers for setting records and stuff. Also the voltage, the core voltage mode, so you have an override mode, is also what we call fixed voltage. Let's see if we can type in a voltage here. No, also not. I don't know why we cannot just enter. Are all our keyboards incompatible with our BIOS? Interesting.
It's a very old keyboard that you're using.
Yeah, this one is a very basic one. Anyway, that was override mode, so that's the fixed one. Offset mode is the one you can also use with dynamic overclocks, and if you do an offset minus, then you do basically an undervolt. Very similar to the AC load line we talked about. So if you do both, then you will be double undervolting, and then it will crash sooner. Yeah. So do either one or the other, but not simultaneously. Then it will be very hard to control. I've messed with this on Raptor Lake before, and
did you see a lot of blue screens?
When I did both, yes. So don't do that. I did it, so you don't have to. A CPU core voltage. That's just a setting you're gonna do. Also the system agent and the NGU, that's new with the Arrow Lake. That one, you probably can find guides on the internet what to set for best results. And SA is also, if you want to do memory overclocking, usually SA voltage also need to be tuned or set to a specific voltage to get the best results. There's also a lot of other voltages. I have no clue if you really need to touch them at all. So before the DDR voltages you could play around with, but with DDR5 not that much.
Yeah, it doesn't give you much.
Still, I'm not an overclocker, so just check the pages or the YouTubes from your favorite overclocker, and they will tell you what to set.
If you're into memory overclocking, the BIOS streams
BIOS
are
is
usually
a very good one. Yeah,
he goes very deep into also all the
Yeah.
sub timings and optimizing.
The videos are a
those kind
bit
of
long, but if you're
Yeah.
really interested, then
You can watch it on like 1.5 times speed.
Yeah, that for sure. Yeah, you won't miss much. No.
But a lot of useful information in them for sure.
Yeah, the CPU specifications basically very similar to the core center we talked about on the easy mode. There's also the extension stuff, not really surprising to anyone, I would say. And the memory Z stuff is also what we copied from the Click BIOS 5, which is also in the core center part, only shown in a different way. So this is the JDEC one, and here's the XMP one, profile one. It's just basically in text. Okay. And CPU features, sometimes you want to disable the virtualization and stuff like that for certain maybe OSs or older OSs, but usually you don't need to touch this. You can even disable the NPU if you want. Not sure why you would need that. Also dynamic tuning technology, maybe for overclocking you would like to disable this part. So that's the overclocking part for Intel.
Burak's asking, in the previous BIOSes there were preset XMP modes. Do we have it now? Yeah, basically you can just set the XMP profiles. Those are stored in the memory module.
Yeah.
And basically what the motherboard then does is set the recommended settings from the memory manufacturer. So for example, now I think we're using Kingston modules. So Kingston basically knows that those modules can do certain timings at a certain voltage, and that's what it will preload basically into our BIOS. That's how it works. So those presets are still there.
Yeah, but there was a BIOS that you could also set your own custom profile.
Oh, your custom one. Oh,
Yeah,
I think
those are not supported anymore. I haven't seen that in new BIOSes. Also not on the Z790.
yeah, because I think it
I
was
think it
like,
was with Z690 only.
but it only worked if not all the slots in the memory module were filled already by
yeah,
the
it could also depend
memory
on
manufacturer.
the DIMM. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not sure. I haven't seen
But good
those
question.
DIMMs anymore.
We can look into
yeah.
it. Yeah.
We need to check. I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay, so this is the Intel OC part. We can go to the AMD one now. I'll just reboot this one to BIOS again. I will not save the settings here because we messed around with voltages and protections and
Let's
stuff.
switch to AMD. It's currently rebooting, that's why it's at no signal.
Oh, it's trying to boot from my USB stick. Oh,
The
yeah.
Intel one.
Yeah, the Intel
Ah,
one
yeah.
is, where's the delete button on this one? This is not a full keyboard either.
There's a compact model.
I have a compact. There's no delete button here.
That's
That's
a very
interesting.
old keyboard as well. Maybe switch to the white one again, because the
okay.
keyboard wasn't the issue.
It has a FN key.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the MPG BIOS look. So that's the pink color. And,
So- AMD in this case.
AMD in this case, yeah, this is the X870E carbon Wi-Fi. And BIOS is 1A21. Also, we need to tell you that the numbering has changed a little bit from the BIOS versions. Before we had 3 digits, and it was a bit of a weird sequence, I would say. So the 0 came after the 1 to 9 or 1 to ABCs and so on. And nowadays the numbering is normal, meaning 0 is lower than 1. So before we need to explain how our numbering worked, now we don't, because we are doing the same as the rest of
sounds
the
like
world.
improvement.
Yeah, that I was really happy with that. But now I'm getting used to that we're not weird anymore. Okay, so the basic, so the easy mode is very similar to Intel. Only the MSI performance preset for AMD is called PBA Auto, meaning
So basically
it's disabled,
disabled, yeah.
and PBO Enable.
Yeah.
PBO Enable doesn't really mean anything either, because it only means something if you set the power and the current limits differently than AMD's recommended. So
Yeah.
I think this is a bit of a weird page. Nobody is helped by this
Usually,
page.
if you want to play around with PBO, you would set it manually through the advanced settings.
Yeah, we're going to show you that part, because that's the interesting part for AMD overclocking, I would say. The rest is basically the same.
Interesting question in Twitch chat by Mr. Masterdogs. How fast can the fan icon spin?
Yeah, I was
fan-
also surprised at 3,000 RPM, but it looks like 10,000 for me. I'm not sure if the capture is also picking up that
It's almost
speed,
like a
but
circle.
yeah, exactly. And I said, maybe we can slow down the animation, but they didn't change it. Anyway, but good that you see the same as I do. I did put XMP memory in the AMD system. I didn't put an Expo kit here.
So that's when you get a XMP, so basically XMP on AMD.
Yeah, but you can use XMP just as well on AMD as on Intel, and
Yeah.
Expo on Intel just as good as on AMD. Here is the speeds again. So if I would choose this one, I would go with either XMP1 or XMP2. Usually for AMD, the 6000 speed is still recommended.
Because of the Infinity Fabric.
The Infinity Fabric will be running 1-to-1 mode, and that's a bit similar to what we call Gear 2 and Gear 4 mode in Intel. So you want to be as highly clocked, so the memory controller clock would be higher, and therefore you would have less latencies and higher bandwidth.
Yeah, because when it's out of sync, that's when you get
Yeah.
the latency penalty, basically.
Exactly, yes. And if you go to, for example, 6400, this kit is a 6400, the timings are basically almost the same as the 6000 one, but since the Infinity Fabric will be running out of sync, it will still be probably slower than the 6000 one.
Yeah.
And you can still do the out of sync one, but then go to like 7000 or even higher modes, then it will cancel each other out because of
Yeah.
the higher clocked memory modules.
But slightly higher, but out of sync would be
Is slower.
slower.
Exactly.
than-
So this is the advanced part. Most of it is the same. For security, if you go to trusted computing, you would see that this one also has a firmware TPM device, and now the vendor is called AMD instead of Intel. That is basically the difference for this one. And then of course the overclocking parts are different. A lot of stuff is the same, so DRAM speeds, and also here we have the F clock you can play around with. Usually around 2000 would be where you want to be, or slightly higher, like 2133 is if you want to overclock that part.
But that depends on the quality of your CPU as well.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the U-clock and memory clock divider. So if you need to run in the divide by 2 mode, that is where the out of sync part comes from, and that's where the latency part latency will increase, and therefore your performance will be lower. There's also an interesting one which I haven't played with. It's called Latency Killer. I'm not sure what it does. It's a mystery.
This is
feature.
actually something from AMD itself. It should improve latency, but I think it is situational. But this is definitely something you could look into and to see.
But I haven't seen any good explanation of
No,
it.
for me it's also not entirely clear what it changes in the background, but it's part of the new AMD Agisa.
Yeah. For memory also we have high efficiency mode. We only have one setting. Auto.
So this is basically the AMD equivalent of memory extension mode on Intel.
Yeah, now you have only enabled, disabled basically. Yeah. Why it's called auto and enabled.
But I think when you enable, you do get different presets.
We do have presets.
You get like balanced and tighter.
The menu is just slightly different.
Yeah.
And I like these numbers better, or these names better,
it's
because it
clearer.
just say what it does.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a bit weird. Anyway.
This is also what I'm using at home. This was already supported also on 5000 series. And actually in certain games, it makes a bit of a difference. I can see some it is not for every game, but certain games, they benefit from the optimized sub timings. And you can see like actual higher FPS, like not within margin of error, but actually higher.
Yeah. The high efficiency mode, especially in the in the latency kind of programs. For example, the IDA memory test is the most common one people show with this functionality.
Yeah.
But there's also 7-zip. If you run that benchmark and you have the memory, the high efficiency mode,
also benefits
that
a lot?
also benefits. Yeah.
Okay.
You can see definitely changes there. So it doesn't hurt to enable it. Memory triad is something also on Intel, but also on AMD, and you can just select any.
So a question from Skeets earlier, memory triad, will this be coming to AMD boards as well? It's already there?
Yeah, it has been already there for a couple of generations, and you can just try several timings and see if it works. If it doesn't, you just need to go one step slower. There's another option for DRAMs in AMD that's not in Intel, and that's, for example, the Hynix 16 gig DDR6000 mode. It's the optimized profile and also the what they call a bit of the golden rule for AMD. And you can try to run that profile, and then it should be as optimized as possible, as at least our BIOS think so. One thing I also want to mention is the memory context restore. AMD BIOSes seem to boot a lot slower than Intel ones, especially if you run high frequency memory, also in Expo mode.
Also, especially
XMP
the first
mode.
time you're booting.
No, all the time. If this one is disabled,
Yeah,
then it will be slow every time.
Every time.
If you enable it, then it will be only slow the first time because
yeah.
it will retrain, this setting up the voltages for your memory. And then after the first training, so after the first boot, booting will be a lot quicker. Yeah. So this is a good tip to speed up the boot times for AMD. For Intel, it's less of an issue. Okay. Also, we have voltages, and also for AMD, if you want to do like a fixed frequency, fixed voltage overclock, you can still do so to achieve records and stuff, but most of the time for 24/7 overclocks will still be dynamic overclocking. And the easiest way to do that, you can play around with the ratios and stuff. You can do adaptive and do some levels here. This basically is a preset of PBO. This is what our BIOS engineers and our OC team have developed, so you can set performance modes in PBO, and you can play around with that.
So they're basically PBO presets.
Exactly, yes. We can also go to PBO manually, and that's going to advanced CPU configuration, same as with Intel, where you did the power limits, and then go to AMD overclocking, and here is the precision boost overdrive. Here you can also control the cores or the CCDs. So if you want to disable the one CCD completely, for example, if you have a 9750 X3D and you only want to run the one with the extra cache, you can disable one of them. And you have to figure out which one. And with the precision boost overdrive, you have more tools, but also more presets. So here's the enhanced modes again. That's the same as I showed you before. But also, if you want to keep like a certain maximum temperature, CPU temperature, you can set it to 85 degrees, for example, if you like to do so.
I think this was actually a really interesting option on certain CPUs, because you only gave up like 5% performance or less, and the power consumption was a lot lower, like sometimes up to 20% or something.
Also, sometimes there's an eco mode here, but not for the CPU, apparently. Precision boost overdrive in advanced mode, then you can set the limits. You can set the limits that it's adhering to what your motherboard is capable of, or you can do it even manually. And these are very similar to the power limits that Intel has. Only on AMD, it doesn't give you much more performance anyway. It has been tuned already quite a bit, unless you're also going to change the ratios and stuff like that. So most gains you can get at AMD is more the efficiency gain, so performance keeping almost the same as stock, and just trying to lower the voltages through curve optimizer. That's what you also do at home.
Yeah.
And
So lower power consumption.
You have some options. This one is a dual CCD CPU, so you can also do per CCD. But most people just use the all
So that
cores,
option I don't have with my Ryzen 5 because it's a single CCD CPU.
And positive means overvolting and negative means undervolting. And you can set here between 0 and 50, I believe. Hopefully typing works well in this one.
Yeah.
Hey, it works. So some CPUs can do minus 30, some can only do minus 10. And be still stable.
And usually, it's not for all of them, but usually a Ryzen 5 would go further than a Ryzen 9.
Yeah.
But again, there are very good Ryzen 5s and there are very poor Ryzen 5s. So not like, for example, 30 millivolt offset, negative offset, so undervolting. Not every Ryzen 5 can do this either.
No. But it's a way to.
Because I believe I'm on the negative 30 millivolts, so mine could do this, but Peter's crashed, for example. Even though they're both 5600X.
I had a 9600X, and that could do minus 50, still stable.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's really low. Mine also cannot do that.
Yeah, but I don't know. Some CPUs are just. Yeah.
Golden sample.
Yeah, exactly. They have a lot of margin. They can even drop lower voltages.
I also tested a system here.
Then I tried also the offset voltage, and then it crashed. So both is still not recommended.
I think I also tested here with the 7950X3D.
Yeah.
But I believe that one already crashed at like minus 10, minus 15, at least over all cores. So maybe you could optimize them further by doing it per individual core, per CCD. But that one couldn't go as far.
Yeah, yeah. The per core is just too much.
Takes a lot of time, especially with the 16-core CPU.
With CCD, I could imagine, because now with the 9000 series, you have one CCD which is for higher boost, and the one is for slightly less high boost, I would say. So yeah, you could play around with that one. I definitely see the benefit of that for this CPU, but. Per core, no, that's too much work. I can show you per core.
If you have a lot of time on your hands and you like these kind of things, then it can be fun.
These are the amounts of, you have 16 cores, so you have
and you can also define per core if you want a positive or a negative offset, so overvolt or undervolt.
Yeah, yeah. Depending on what you want. If you want to do overclocking, then you want to add some voltages. If you want to do efficiency, then you want to and not touch any clocks, then you probably only want a negative offset.
The negative offset also gave me some extra performance because my CPU ran a bit cooler, so it sustained the boost clocks longer.
Yeah,
and also boosted higher.
Yeah.
So I actually lowered the power consumption.
That also works on Intel. If you do for the Raptor Lakes, if you do lower power, then it won't run into your thermal limit.
Yeah.
And then it will have
so it can boost higher and for a longer time.
Yeah. For the graphics part, you can also do curve optimizer, but the graphics inside this CPU is, of course, not really capable of anything. So yeah. And then there's also curve shaper, and this means it's curve optimizer for certain temperature sets. So for low and medium and high temperature, you can do frequency. This is very similar to the thermal velocity boost on voltage settings. Yeah. Okay.
But curve optimizer, I think, especially if you want a very efficient system or if you're building in small form factor, very interesting setting.
Yeah.
That can also give you quite a lot if you play around with it.
SMT control, you can also disable that part, so now every core has two
SMT,
threads.
simultaneous multi-threading, basically the AMD equivalent of hyper-threading on Intel.
But Arrow Lake doesn't have hyper-threading anymore, so the setting was not in the Intel BIOS, at least the one we showed. You can do some peak control and throttling, but not that interesting, I would say. Some AVX control, and also this is like a protection bit.
By the way, also the X3D gaming mode, that will also disable SMT, right? Simultaneous multi-threading.
You can do that, yeah?
No, but if you enable the X3D gaming mode, I think that one will automatically also disable SMT, so every core will only run at a single thread instead of dual.
True. So you will lose in multi-threaded performance, but you will gain in certain games. That's
but also very situational if it really makes a difference. Right?
Yeah, and then if you want to switch between multi-threaded loads and gaming, then you need to
go back
in
to
the
the
BIOS
and
disable it
and reboot.
No, I didn't really see that. Yeah, here's the X3D.
If you only use your PC for gaming, then it could be worth it. If you also do multi-threaded workloads, I would keep this disabled.
The benefit was very small.
Yeah, very small.
Yeah, and
also
only
in certain
games,
no benefit.
No, indeed. I think the AMD part is very similar. You also have the load line calibration control for fixed voltage overclocking, offset voltages. So this one only supports still as the override mode, the offset mode. Not sure what the override plus offset mode is, because why would you do both? I asked them before and didn't really get an understandable answer. Anyway, it doesn't matter. DRAM voltages, for DDR5, not that interesting. At least not for troubleshooting, I would say. For overclocking, maybe yes. That's the AMD part, I would say. Shall we do BIOS flashing?
Yeah. And there are two different ways.
And we can demo both of them.
Yeah.
Maybe simultaneous if you want.
Let's maybe start with M-Flash, because I would say in most situations that's like the preferred way of updating your BIOS.
Yeah. Can you switch to the Intel one?
I will go to Intel.
I will just go. I want to show you the whole process because I already prepared a USB stick. In order to use M-Flash, you need a USB stick. You need to format it in FAT32 again, because that's what our BIOS can read and write, but in this case only needs to read. Maybe NTFS is supported because read is possible, but for safety I always use an older stick. Also recommended to use a 32 gigabyte or smaller SSD, USB stick, sorry, SSD not. External SSDs probably not supported. Not sure about that though. What you want to do is go to the MSI website, and I already selected the right motherboard for this system, and normally you will get the overview.
Make sure you get your exact model, because sometimes you have slight variations, but make sure it's exactly the model that you have.
Now sometimes, for example, with the Z690 you have the Tomahawk Wi-Fi and the Tomahawk Wi-Fi DDR4. Those are different BIOSes, so please select the correct one. This one is BIOS 1A60, and there is already a newer one. Of course, that part I did on purpose. 1A7 is definitely recommended because it also improves the speed for Intel, for gaming especially, because during launch or at launch there were some issues with power saving and drivers and updates. Also some unfortunate timing with Windows 11 updating to 24H2, and Intel tested everything at 23H2, which ran perfectly, but not the new Windows 11. Burak
says the system won't let you flash when you select the wrong image. No, that's of course for safety reasons.
That's still safety, but that's true. There's a safety catch there anyway.
To make sure you don't accidentally flash the wrong image.
Basically just you don't have to click every BIOS and go from this to that to the next one. You can just go to the latest one, download that one.
Here you can also see if it's a beta BIOS or if it's a stable version. So these are the stable versions that you see now.
I'm going to ask them to put the full version. Since we're using 4-digit versions now, it should say 1A50. And this one is a beta one, so this one does have 4 digits. It's 1A45. So if the last digit isn't a 0, it means it's a beta. Okay, so I already downloaded it, and if I go to downloads, then I see a zip file. You can You don't put the zip file on the stick, but you unpack.
Extract it.
Yeah, extract. This is the BIOS file. It's compressed, it's 10 megabytes, and uncompressed, it's 32 megabytes. That's the exact size of the chip. So just click copy, go to the USB stick. Well, this is a USB stick I've been using before for BIOS updates. And just copy the file to it. You don't need to rename it or anything. People were interested in my batch file, so I'm going to show you now. And we will also put it on the forum.
But if you make a screenshot now,
you can also,
can already make it yourself as well.
Yeah, but then you have to type a lot. This part is just a script copied from somewhere else, and it asks you to run as admin, basically.
If you put it in Google image search, you can also copy the text.
This is the correct command line, and for some reason, sometimes the first time it doesn't take it, and that's why I just copied it twice, and then it works all the time.
That's the trick, right?
It's a weird Windows thing, probably. But if this is the asks you to run as admin, and then you click yes, then it will go to the UEFI or the BIOS. Actually, it doesn't go to BIOS; only works with UEFI firmwares.
Yeah. So, in which situation would you recommend to use MFlash, and when would you recommend to use the Flash BIOS button?
If you can go to your BIOS, use MFlash. If you can't, you have to use BIOS Flash button.
So that could be, for example, for troubleshooting.
Yeah.
Or if
most commonly is that you'll buy a motherboard and Intel or AMD has introduced a new CPU and you bought that one. But
so let's say you buy an AMD 9000 series, but you buy it in combination with a 600 series motherboard.
Yeah.
Where maybe the right BIOS version is not present yet, and you need to update it.
Yeah. Then it won't boot with your new CPU. So what you do is just connect the power supply to the motherboard. You don't need to put anything else on it.
No. So no memory, no CPU, no graphics.
We will show you later with a full system also possible. So if you already installed the CPU and a cooler and everything, don't worry, just leave it there. It's just an external, it's not an external chip. It's a chip on the motherboard that will flash your BIOS PROM on the motherboard. So it doesn't activate your CPU and memory.
And of course, in that situation, you can still use MFlash, but then you need an older generation CPU that is already supported.
If you leave the CPU on, make sure the cooler is also on there. So I don't know if there will be any power to the CPU, but you don't want to risk your CPU being fried during the process.
Just to be sure.
Yeah. So if you want to go to MFlash, you can just click the button here, and then it asks you to reboot. Why does it not do this in the BIOS? Well, it will now unload the management engine firmware, and it can also update it after it's been rebooted to the MFlash application. Otherwise, you have to do the BIOS part and the ME part in two separate stages. Wouldn't be as convenient. So they just ask you to reboot and go to MFlash. MFlash, very simple interface. Should pop up in a second. Enter flash mode. Here we go. You can only choose folders and drives. So apparently you can do other partitions, I think. Yeah, this is just the NTFS Windows partition. Probably works as well. I always use a USB stick, especially this one. And you click the file, you just extract it to your USB stick, click yes. And then it should start flashing.
And the flashing process always takes a bit of time. So now you see it updating, and in the bottom you see a progress bar as well.
Yeah. So also, it shows you, I don't have a cursor, the CPU temperature. So if there's any trouble with your cooling, then it might, if it heats up too much, then it might fail. Yeah. And then you still need to use the BIOS flash button again.
But usually, when it's doing this, just do nothing and wait until it's done.
Yeah. Just
in the meanwhile,
pray for that there's no power outage or something.
In the meanwhile, while this is flashing, maybe we can already show how to prepare a USB drive for the Flash BIOS button on AMD.
Yeah, we can switch to AMD.
So
And
the
you
top
see
right, you can see the progress,
bar. Yeah. The situation is not dissimilar to the Intel one. Maybe I'm doing it a little bit wrong now because I'm using an AMD system that's still working and booting and can run to BIOS. But for demonstration purposes.
So usually you would just use mFlash on this as well?
Yeah, and the stick you'll put in another system you can download the file from.
Yeah.
In this case, I'm using the same system as I'm going to recover, or if I'm going to use the BIOS flash button on.
Mm-hmm.
Still the same, so go to the MSI.com website, search for your product. Exact product is necessary. In this case, it's a X870E carbon Wi-Fi, and go to the BIOS. Same here, just download the latest one. At the moment, it's running at 1A21. I can show you that part as well, just to make sure that it's not trickery or something, that it was already at 1A23. So it's running BIOS 1A21 at the moment. So I downloaded, did I download it? I'm not sure. No, now I did.
No, you did.
It's quite quick. We're having some capture issues, I think.
We're back.
We're back?
Seems
okay,
like.
good. So again, prepare a USB stick. This is really important. This needs to be FAT32 and needs to be a smaller than 32 gigabytes drive.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise it won't work. Not every USB stick is compatible with BIOS flash button, we have noticed. So that's a pity, but it's a hardware chip, so it's not, yeah. We were depending on the hardware vendor on that one. So copy this one, copy it, well this stick is still empty, and copy it to the root of the USB stick. Then we need
step, rename it.
Rename it, yes, rename it to MSI, and also you need to change the extension to .rom. Does it need to be capitals? No, but I always do.
But
Don't
make
know
sure
why.
to rename it, because
Yeah.
otherwise it won't be able to read the file. This
Yeah.
is how it
The
recognizes
hardware
what
chip
file.
always searches for a certain USB port, so you need to select the correct one.
Yeah.
And it needs to be MSI.rom in the root of that USB stick, otherwise the hardware chip cannot find the BIOS file you want to put in.
By the way, as you can see in the top right, the Intel system just finished mFlash,
Yeah.
so it's now rebooting.
Yeah, we can wait for that and then focus on the AMD one. At the moment, we only prepared the USB stick, and we'll show you the. We can switch to the Intel once we've got an image. We had 1A60 on the Intel, and we flashed 1A70. So if everything went well, which I'm sure it did, 1A70 should be on there. It does a couple of power on and power off cycles, especially if the ME firmware was also updated. That's all normal, don't worry about that. It will come back.
No panic required.
Yeah. mFlash has been tested so many times by myself. I have.
Works really well.
Yeah, it works really well. That's only hardly in 10 years that it ever failed. And if it fails, then usually it's because the USB stick had some file errors on the copied file. My contact in Taiwan, they're now writing a very long email about, oh, the BIOS is not working, blah blah blah, and then you tested it, no problem. Then you go back and forth for a couple of days, and then it turns out your USB stick is just screwed up. Sometimes like that happens, but not that often, luckily.
So now we're back at the Intel system, currently booting up. There we go.
Yeah, so we can check it in HW info if it's the correct BIOS, but we can also check if the typing is working now.
Yeah,
the typing of the voltages
yeah.
and stuff. And the power limits, especially the power limits. So 1A70. So the BIOS update was successful. Please note that after a BIOS update, your XMP is disabled.
Yeah.
So if you set XMP to a certain profile before,
Also in
now
general,
it's back to standard.
all your settings are back to standard, not just XMP.
Except the
yeah.
fan profile is still the same.
Yeah, that one it says?
Yeah. It's because of my colleague Torsten in Germany.
Okay.
So thanks, Torsten. He knows. So we go back to the BIOS, and yeah, then of course, because everything has been reset except for the fan profile, you need to set it up again.
Yeah.
So
also
XMP
if you,
fan profiles, you can.
if you applied any overclocks and stuff,
Yeah.
you have to do it again.
The idea behind the
Unless
the
you
fan
save the profile,
profiles that being saved is that if people have maybe exotic cooling and set it up in a specific way,
Yeah.
you don't want to mess with that because then it might overheat during booting or whatever.
Yeah.
We should be in BIOS by now, or not? Takes a while. Let's check the BIOS post-LED. What is it doing? A2. We do have a different keyboard now. Is it a keyboard? A2 usually is a postcode that's associated with plug and play or device detection, so that's why I'm unplugging
So
the...
peripherals often.
So I'm gonna just turn it off for a minute, second, turn it on again. Now I'm just gonna bash the delete button. Oh, this one has a delete button, very good. Not sure what happened there though. We haven't changed that much. The only thing that this system has is that we connected the USB power for the portable monitor to a
Into the
USB
motherboard.
port on the motherboard.
Yeah.
And if I'm in Windows, it will say last connected USB device not recognized. So it's detecting something on the USB port, but not as a USB device because it's
we
a
just use it
display
for
port
power,
basic.
yeah.
Yeah. So I assume that's the case, but it's just me guessing here. So again, I would just load optimized defaults for good measure, and then set the XMP, set my fan profile to whatever I want, and then F10 and exit. So this is one A70. We can go to the advanced mode, and earlier we had power limits we could not enter. If I said 250, hey, it works.
Already fixed.
This was not scripted.
So no angry emails needed.
No. So there was a bug in one A60 that I didn't know of, and it's fixed in one A70. So there
That's
you go.
why you have BIOS
That's why you
updates
have BIOS
sometimes,
updates, yeah. But also to support more new memory and stuff
New
like
CPUs.
that. Compatibility, yeah.
Yeah.
CPUs also, yeah. There will be new CPUs for this platform as well. But since it's the first generation, it will be supported probably anyway. When there's a real new generation, then sometimes it needs a new BIOS update to get booting again.
Okay, back to AMD.
So the AMD, we're gonna shut it down.
Yeah. So the USB drive is now prepared, so it has the BIOS file on there. It's called MSI.rom.
Yeah, we can also show the detailed cam.
Yeah.
So the LED is still on, so it's still shutting down. Now it's turned off. These LEDs will keep running as long as there's power. Of course, the power supply needs to be on for the BIOS flash button to work. There's also a gray rectangle around this USB port, also labeled probably as BIOS flash button.
Yeah.
Also in the manual you can find which USB port is used for USB BIOS.
And this is
BIOS
very
flash
important
button.
because if you plug it into a different USB port, then it will not work with this
It will not
feature.
recognize the MSI.ROM file, and therefore it will not start.
Yeah, so
BIOS flash
specifically,
button.
if you want to use this feature, put it in the highlighted.
We
USB.
chose this board also because it has a nice BIOS flash button with an LED in the button, so you can see once I press it what it does. So I'm going to press it, start flashing for a short period and then for a longer period. So now it will turn on the power supply, then it reads the BIOS file and started flashing a little bit quicker. And it will do this for about 4 to 5 minutes. Well, let's say 5 minutes for good measure. And then it will be updated, if all goes well, to 1A23. That's the file we downloaded.
Now we can see it in the top right updating. Maybe in the meanwhile we can pick some winners for the giveaway, because this will take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
So for today's giveaway, we are giving away Steam wallet codes, so I hope you all signed up. Of course, we didn't do any drawings during the stream, so we will pick 4 winners right now. The first winner, Ruud, the honor is all yours. Can you read it?
That would be Niklas K.
Congratulations, you won a Steam wallet code.
Congrats.
The next one is Tommy K. Congratulations, you also won a Steam wallet code. And the next one's for Ruud again, because this one's more difficult.
I'm not sure. Is Dr. Cree or Cree?
I think Krilly, Dr. Krilly.
Yeah, okay.
Congratulations, you also won a
Congrats,
Steam wallet
yeah.
code.
The next one is also difficult. That's yours.
Okay, the last winner is Aukaulatzair.
Could also be Ukulat or something.
I have no idea, sorry for
Fine.
butchering your name, but congratulations, you also won a Steam wallet code.
Congrats to all.
Yeah,
Yep.
congrats to everyone. Please keep an eye on your mailbox, then we'll email the Steam wallet codes to you in the coming days with some instructions on how to redeem them. Congrats.
Congrats.
So our BIOS is still flashing.
Yeah.
So this takes approximately 5 minutes. So that
Yeah.
is a little bit longer, I think, than M-Flash, right?
Depending. AMD also slightly longer, so I would say around 4 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And Intel, depending on if it's updating everything, including the ME firmware, then
Yeah.
it also takes longer. But if it doesn't need to update the ME firmware, then sometimes it's finished within 2 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
So that, yeah, depends on what's updating.
Burak is asking in YouTube chat, how will we be sure about the completion of the BIOS update?
For the, if you mean the BIOS flash button, it means it will turn off itself.
Yeah.
Then
And reboot.
then power on again,
Yeah.
and then the flashing stops of the flash button.
And then it will basically boot into your Windows
Yeah.
again, and there you
Yeah,
can.
hopefully
yeah.
you will get an image then.
Yeah. And then in HW info, you can also check the BIOS version to see
Yeah.
if everything was successfully flashed and you're
Yeah.
indeed running the new version.
On this motherboard, you have a very nice BIOS flash button with an LED in the button.
Mhm.
With lower end models, you usually have also BIOS flash button, but the LED is more inside the I/O, the metal I/O shield.
Mhm.
So you have to look under an angle and see if it's still flashing or not. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's not as obvious as this one.
Yeah.
That's why we use this one for demonstration purposes as well.
So another question, Warmworks asking in Twitch chat, so if it fails for any reason, if you leave it in upon boot, it should go back into the updating screen?
No, you just have to push the button again. But
Yeah.
if you do it again, the result will probably be the same. So the BIOS file will be updated, but then probably you have a different issue than your CPU not being recognized by the BIOS.
Yeah.
So it can also be like a memory issue or maybe a graphics card issue that you're not getting an image. But usually you can see that also by the post display. If your motherboard has a display, then if nothing happens with the BIOS, so the BIOS isn't started, usually it will just show you 00 or FF. right from the beginning and doesn't change at all. If there's another issue, if it does all kinds of codes and stops at 5.5 and then do the same sequence over and over, it just tries to recognize your memory and it doesn't get it, then you also don't have an image on the display. But then it's a memory issue. Like the A2 I was having here, that's usually a device detection, and I'm not talking about graphics or memory, but then it's a peripheral like SATA or SSD, hard drive, any USB device. That kind of detection is used with A2. And A2, sometimes you can still have an A2 issue once you have a BIOS display or display on the screen. That also happens sometimes, and then it just delays your Windows boot. Also happens.
What should you do if you notice that your USB drive is not working?
How do you mean?
So if you have compatibility issue,
Oh,
just try a different one?
Yeah, indeed. What happens is, you saw me push the button, then it will do like a very short period of slow flashing. Now it's, I think I heard the fans stop.
It stopped flashing as well.
The flashing stopped, so it did a power off and a power on. And now it should come back. But if your USB stick is incompatible with BIOS flash button, I'm getting some HDMI here as well, then it will do the first part, the slow flashing, yes, it powers off, then powers on. It probably flashes for a second or two, and then it stops flashing, means I cannot find the MSI.ROM file.
Yeah.
And that could be because your USB stick is formatted incorrectly, or your USB key is not supported by that hardware chip.
Yeah.
That's possible. So if you use 64 gigabyte sticks, I haven't seen anyone working with this chip yet, so that's why we recommend 32 or smaller. Also, what we saw is that the older the stick, the more chance you will have that it's compatible. The AMD is booting now. Yeah.
So basically, a slower, simplistic stick
slower
is your
USB
safest
2 stick, maybe even like a gift one, you know.
Yeah.
Promotional gift, that would be
Those
perfect.
usually work best. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be perfect for BIOS flashing because you're not. It's usually small, so you're not going to use it. It's USB 2, so it's slow, and you're probably not using it for anything else anymore anyway. So it's excellent for BIOS flashing. That's why I use a very old 2 gig Kingston stick, USB 2, and an even much older Windows Vista promotional stick, 4 gigabytes. Wow, we got it from Microsoft themselves ages ago. You can tell because Windows Vista. Probably
So if you have
not a lot of people know about that anymore.
If you have old USB drives, don't throw them away just yet. They're perfect for flashing.
Yeah, exactly. So now we're at BIOS 1A23, so we're updated. Of course, also go back to the BIOS, make sure you will load defaults, do XMP or Expo again, and set your cooling according to your wishes.
Some more questions in chat. Brave Souls asking on YouTube. I have the MSI 670E gaming Wi-Fi. When will you release Click BIOS X for this motherboard? For 600 series, they will stick to Click BIOS 5. So they will still get BIOS updates, but they will not get Click BIOS X. That is specifically for 800 series AMD or Intel and future generations. Ian9K is asking in Twitch chat if the file is corrupted for some reason, can the flash process detect that? Like check for file integrity?
Yes, well, of course, not in every case, but what we've seen in the past is that if your USB stick has copied the file but hasn't copied it correctly, or maybe you pulled it too quickly when you were copying, then the file size in File Explorer, for example, will show that the file will be 32 gigabytes. If you plug it in, and for example, if you use mFlash, and you will select the file, and you're sure you selected the right one, and it says, this is not an MSI BIOS file, then you know there's some corruption going on in that file. That also.
That's how you see that something
yeah.
is wrong with it.
But with the BIOS flash button, you only can see it's flashing or it isn't, and we cannot tell if it's because the BIOS file is corrupted, or the USB stick is not supported, or USB stick formatting is incorrect. It just doesn't start flashing.
Yeah.
But there's no way of telling what exactly is going
So
on
that's
except for
also
retrying it.
That's also usually why M-Flash, if you have the option to use that, would also give you more information about this.
Yeah.
So would be the preferred method.
For sure, if you if your system is still booting and you have the screen, you can go into the BIOS setup.
Yeah.
That's the preferred way, because then you have immediate feedback of what's going on.
Yeah.
The BIOS flash button is more for troubleshooting if you cannot go into BIOS setup.
Okay. So yeah, basically, again, just enable either Expo or XMP.
I always do F6 load BIOS default, memory, and oh sorry, not this one, the hardware monitoring. Click the wrong one.
Yeah.
So setting this up and then F10 save and exit. That's usually what I do.
And then reboot it, and you're good to go with your new BIOS version.
Exactly. Yeah.
That was it for today's live stream. So next week we have a very special topic. I cannot tell you too much about it yet, but keep an eye on the announcement as well, because it may be in a slightly different live stream slot than what you're used to. So make sure to tune in next week. Again, keep an eye out on the announcement, and we hope to see you again next week. Ruud, so much thanks for preparing everything today, for explaining everything. I hope you also thought it was useful and you learned something.
Hope so. Yeah.
Hope to see you again next week. Not on Wednesday, but on Thursday. See you again next week. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.